Geschichten eines Flugzeugbauers. 2010 began as 2009 ended, with a lot of work, and it was the continuation of an incredible success story. At the same time, we continued to work on the 3 Fokker E3, the 4 Fokker D7, the Fokker DR1 for me, for Marvin, and the one for Jose Morales, the 3 Fokker C1 for Peter Jackson, Hartmut Weber and me, as well as the individual parts for the Rumpler C4 in addition. Both the 2 D7s for Peter Jackson and the 2 E3s for him were approaching a stage where the raw aircraft looked almost finished. Also my D8 got its wing, which was also completed in 2010. The work timesheets filled up more and more. The only aircraft that fell by the wayside in all this was Oliver Wolf's Fokker D7, but not because it was unimportant or because I put it at the back of the queue to favor others, but because things that had been agreed were simply not kept, material costs were not covered, and he also failed to report the project to the LBA, which is the German Civil Aviation Authorities, as mentioned at the beginning. But I'll deal with this specifically in one of the next episodes, because there are a lot of misconceptions going around in the scene and being spread by people who, on the one hand, have no insight into what happened, or, on the other hand, want to paint a picture that is advantageous to them. My original contract with Peter Jackson also included the construction of a Pfalz D3 and a Pfalz D3A. Here too I was asked to invest a little more time, especially as the E3 was largely completed in 2010, and so the rudder and wing ribs were created, as well as drawings for the wings of the aircraft were done. The wing spars were already in preparation, and most of the materials for the wing building process has been purchased. Of course, all this was also reported by me on the internet, especially on the old The Aerodrome forum. It was probably there that Thomas Jülch became aware of me and heard about the Pfalz D3. Many people will know him from his projects and the Rata he owns, or owned. Anyway, he contacted me and showed interest in a Pfalz D3 which I was to build for him. One of my classmates during the aerobatics training and subsequent training sessions was Stefan Egelhoff. He was a vet from Stuttgart. We talked for a long time, and he was also very interested in the Pfalz D3, which he wanted to build as a self-home-built project with certification as an experimental in Germany with my help. Because of my research on the Pfalz D3, I was also in contact with the employees of the Pfalz Flugzeugwerke at Speyer. And many people will know that the plan was made there to build a replica of the Pfalz D3 in the training workshop. The whole thing started out as a great project, but was then constantly cut back and modified at managerial level, so that all that remained at the end of what was initially planned as an airworthy replica was a mock-up that would always be able to carry the snow loads if it was placed on a pedestal in front of the company building. Everyone involved was very disappointed about this. I was invited to view this model, this full-size model. It was actually a beautiful airplane and well worth rebuilding. The management team at Pfalz had probably understood this by now and talked to me about the possibility of doing a reproduction of the original prototype of the Pfalz D3 in an airworthy condition. So at the beginning of 2010 the idea was born to build 2 Pfalz D3s for Peter Jackson, one for Thomas Jülch, one for Stefan Egelhoff, one for me, and a prototype for the Pfalz Flugzeugwerke itself. This looked like an insanely great project, in which 6 Pfalz D3s could be built. Let me tell you right away, the events that followed meant that this did not materialize. There was a lot of upheaval at the Vintage Aviator Limited. You could tell from the outside that something wasn't right, and the rumor mill was churning. I became increasingly aware of this over the course of 2010. The climate became much cooler. I was in daily contact with Jean DeMarco, who was the manager of the workshops there. Everything was clarified with him. What was done to the aircraft, what the historical sources were, what was included in the documentation, what materials were used, etc. Nothing was done without prior consultation. Nothing was done without prior consultation with Jean DeMarco and the staff at the Vintage Aviator Limited. What was new in spring of 2010 was that I now had to consult with the administration and the accounting department at the Vintage Aviator Limited about every step. Suddenly, and this had never been the case before, every use of every screw, every piece of sheet metal not only had to be mentioned but also exactly tagged in terms of cost. This got worse and more time consuming from month to month. It was almost as if you had to keep track of the cost of everything in New Zealand in order to be able to draw conclusions about where sums of money went, or perhaps to see who was sending money where at the Vintage Aviator Limited. A real Tohuwa Bohu. For those who are interested, I would like to tell you how it all went down for me. I was paid for my work as a freelancer by the Vintage Aviator Limited or the Wawarapa Aviation Limited, respectively. From this salary, I advanced all costs of materials and broke down which parts of this went into my own airplanes or into the airplanes for Peter Jackson. The whole thing was double-checked and checked again by Don McCracken and his office in New Zealand, on the basis of the working time logs in which all material quantities for each operation were itemized, as well as the monthly progress report with the most accurate photo documentation. Only then were my expenses reimbursed. Until 2010, these checks were completed within a week at most, and the money was there. Obviously, something must have happened in New Zealand that caused these checks to take considerably longer from 2010 onwards. In the end, I even had to wait several weeks for my money. Since nothing was ever complained about, my documents must all have been coherent. But there was more going on than I really realized. I will tell you all about it in detail. We continued to work cheerfully and diligently. The E3 and E7 timesheets swelled, and we made good progress. There is also a filmmaker in my circle of friends. His name is Oliver Gortard. He has a small film company and made the TV documentary Geheimprojekt Nutter, or Secret Project Nutter, in which, incidentally, I also enjoyed brief screen fame with my workshop. Anyway, his company not only makes complete films but also film sequences that can be sold to other filmmakers. And so we came up with the idea of filming a few sequences in a period setting with the now finished D8 and DE3, which is still under construction. The result was some beautiful shots. For this purpose, the D8 was brought to the airfield in Allen-Ehingen, where it would later fly. She had passed the first 2 inspections with flying colors, and now I was just waiting for my engine to arrive from New Zealand. We took exterior shots in the style we had in mind in an open field and nearby the airfield. Still with the 80 horsepower Leron fitted, but what can you do? Some of the uniforms came from Bernd Fairless, tailoring shop Bekleidungsamt 13. He makes excellent things. You should have a look on the internet. Frank Boffenmeyer also contributed some great props. Incidentally, the entire set of photos from the recordings is available on the museum's Patreon page. I've also created a little old-fashioned film clip of the raw footage, which I like to let you watch here just for the fun of it. So enjoy this one. The aircraft production of the E3 was filmed in my hall in Schorndorf. A few extras provided the necessary ambience. The whole thing was great fun and produced some wonderful film shots and photographs. The D8 and my own E3 were the stars at the Airfield Festival in Ahlen-Ehingen in September 2010. At the beginning of the year it still looked as if everything would continue to develop as before and that work would not run out in the next few years. This impression persisted even when New Zealand suddenly announced that the E3 was to be packed up and sent to New Zealand as soon as possible. The reason given was that I would then have space again. I assumed for the building of the Pfalz D3 and maybe even more Rumpler parts. Well, what Peter Jackson wants will be done. I would have liked to have added a few small details to the panels here on site, finished and decorated them, but I was assured that this would not be a problem. And so a container was ordered in which the two E3s were shipped to New Zealand. 2 more airplanes on their way to their new home. In the middle of the year we also had a visit from Oliver Wolf. He wanted to take a look at the construction of the aircraft, and again he assured me that he had already submitted a project report for his aircraft and wanted to persuade me to start building the lower wing for his plane. The upper wing was already finished. It was just the time when Jerry Moss was visiting for the second time for a total period of 3 months. He took a lot of time to work on my lower wing of the D7. Oliver Wolf marveled at the construction of the wing, slapping Jerry on the shoulder and admiring his little mosquito, which he painted on my underwing spar as his trademark. I told him that his underwing would go just as well as soon as he had paid for the materials as agreed. Nothing happened until the end of the year. Neither the project report was done, nor the material costs were covered, and so only the lower wing for my own D7 was built. At the same time, the wings for Peter Jackson's 2 D7s were being built, one for an early aircraft and the other one for a late production aircraft. When the wings were ready, the radiators for the 2 D7s still had to be built for Peter Jackson's. I had already completed the 2 other radiators for the other aircraft. But that was a lot of work. 7,040 individual handmade radiator core tubes, individually widened at the end to a hexagon and soft soldered together. Then manufacture the housing, connections and filler necks. Then the leak test. That was quite a task. There will also be a story about this later as we approach 2011. What had been slowly looming in 2010 came to a head in 2011. But before I tell you these details, there are 1 or 2 newspaper articles in the following episodes that have been published in the meantime. And in the Aerodrome forum, the rumor mill was simmering, especially because I started to gradually remove myself from the reports in 2010 or 11. Less from me, more conspiracy theories, fueled by well-known people in the forum, among others. Those of you who remember this will know what I'm talking about. If you're interested, you're welcome to browse through the forum archive at www.theaerodrome.com. Have fun!